On over to the slide, if you would.
Okay. Recording. Hi,
Great.
we're Elizabeth and Jeff.
Hey, you know, so Tipple's Brews and Wine. Welcome to the Tuesday tasting. I know I've done it enough times, maybe I'm going to keep it fresh. Thank you all for coming today. We're going to drink a great wine today. Museum Reserva, a nice red wine. Yeah, please. From Rioja, Spain. The broad points in here, this guy regularly gets 90 plus points. There's really no bad vintage from these guys. And so pairing suggestions for this guy, lamb, pork, roast chicken, chorizo, robust sausage. Actually from them as well, game meats, red or white, red meats and beef, and all kinds of cheeses and olives, that kind of thing. So kind of some robust and savory flavors to go with this great wine. All right, so let's go ahead and jump back to us, please.
Okay.
All right, so let's get right into it. So if you haven't already opened your wine and poured, let's go ahead and do that now. As always, this is a red wine, so I recommend about a 30-minute refrigerator chill to get it down to about 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Florida is much warmer than these wonderful European nations that created the standards for consumption of wine, and their room temperature, and especially their cellar temperature, since we have no cellars, is extremely different from ours. So I prefer about 65 degrees as a start. It's going to warm up as you drink it, obviously to whatever room temperature you're in, usually what, low 70s, mid 70s in the state of Florida.
Celebrating the 50th anniversary.
So it's in it's a really nice intense red, deep cherry garnet color. Hello. Going to be almost a bit purple in its depths. So a lot of red berries, cranberry, kind of a black currant kind of a note on the nose. Intense, almost a licorice quality in the palate. I'm getting you know, and not quite fully raisinated fruit, but certainly very ripe and deep black cherry.
It's definitely black cherry.
And then we should have an evolution depending on how long your wines have been open. I just popped mine open, so it's going to change as we discuss. I'm getting, in addition to that licorice, kind of a nice spice quality.
I'm definitely getting the black cherry.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a pepperiness, though I wouldn't say overwhelmingly. Something that we're not tasting, because this is not as cool an areas we've been drinking from recently. I'm not getting any of that green snapped stem kind of quality. That pyrazine quality, which we've gotten in some of our cool growth locations, is not here. They're richer and darker. Let's go talk about sensation on the palate. Tannins, I'd say medium firm, good structure, and really, and as far as sensation, when you get toward the finish, you do start out with a lot of dark fruits. You finish with some of the brighter cranberry, so it does have a nice acidity that keeps this vibrant and keeps it from becoming a cloying, over-extracted wine, even though it is a big wine.
Yeah, and I'm tasting the tannins throughout, but it's not biting me when I first take a sip.
Sure, absolutely. This guy is 100% Tempranillo. This is from Rioja in Spain, and I'm going to start going into the region and the growth. If you would jump back to the slides. Thank you very much. All right, so here we are in España, one of my favorite wine growing nations in the world. So we are talking about Rioja. So Rioja is right up here in orange, and it is for Spain. Basically it's their most famous region, and it is the region that most people learn about first within Spain. And they grow for the reds 100% Tempranillo all the time. I say all the time. It's all the time until there's an exception everywhere in the world. You know, this is wine, right? But essentially they work with Tempranillo. So if you slide down to the next one, so within Rioja, the area that we're talking about today is Rioja Alta. Rioja Alta. So anyway, all of Rioja is basically known for being arid and mountainous. And it will look very, very different from some of the wine growing regions we've seen recently when we were in Oregon, and then we ran down to New Zealand when they were all doing that coastal effect with the fog coming over. Not the same deal at all. Okay. So we'll take a quick look here. So this is Rioja, and it's an entirely different location. They do not have any issues there with having to worry about drying out the vine. They're not worried about about fungus pretty much at all. In fact, some areas of Rioja are so dry and arid. There'll be some of them, some growth areas on top of these mountains. They'll have plateaus that the phylloxera infection never made it to some areas in Rioja. Wow. And that actually will show up the fact that it's phylloxera resistant in this area because it's so arid. So let's go into, let's jump back real quick, stop sharing. Since I'm going to go off script a little bit, which is what I do. So phylloxera. Phylloxera was an infection for wine vines that almost destroyed wine in the entire world. It originated from the southeastern United States, and it happened because of trade with the southeastern United States once the New World was established. They brought some clippings back of some of the grapevines from here, and it brought these little, they're aphids. They call phylloxera, they call it an infection. Truthfully, it's actually a little bug. It's an aphid. It's a root aphid that goes underground. And they had no idea how to stop it. It was destroying all of the European wine vines. In the end, it was saved by the United States. In Austin, Texas, a man learned how to graft roots to plants. So grafting, which is a kind of a common thing nowadays, where you just take the roots of one plant and bind it to the top of another plant, and they're able to grow together. That was created by Americans to save the wine in the world, and thank goodness for it. So God bless.
So we caused the problem, and we came up with the solution.
It sounds very American, right? It does. It just sounds like.
So now all the European wine vines, except for those on the plateau, are based on this grafting process.
That's right. Almost all wine vines in the world are now grafted because of that. There are a few areas in Spain. Greece is so arid that they actually have very few that ever were infected with phylloxera. So Greece has some of the oldest vines in the world. And we will be drinking Greek wines because they are way undervalued and they are fantastic. And then actually there are a couple of people, I actually have one red blend in the store from California where they flood their vineyard in order to kill all the phylloxera every year, and that is an ungrafted vine. Yeah, so that's worth drinking sometime. Just come ask me about it.
Which one is that, Jeff?
That one is the Ghost Runner, which you know well.
Yeah, I do.
Yes, you do. Yep. So let's go back to the pictures. Go to the next one. All right, so here's another picture of the arid mountainous area that is Rioja. I mean, it's incredible.
Like New Zealand.
Right? It's nothing like New Zealand or Oregon. It's just, they actually get a lot of cool breezes. It is not as hot as it looks. It is arid, but it is not hot, and that's why they're able to grow grapes there. The other thing that is really helpful for growing for really excellent wine growth in this area is that the soil is very poor. And I know I've talked about it before.
I know you have to challenge the
Right.
wine.
So with winemaking, I'll jump over here again. I hate to lecture without my beautiful face, but so with winemaking, and I know some of you guys that are with me every week have heard this, but you want to challenge the health of the vine. So when wine grape vines are challenged and they feel that there's not enough nutrition, then what they begin to do is prepare themselves to propagate away from where they are. So they put all their energy into creating the best possible wine grapes that they can in order to improve their possibility of propagating. And that is why you want poor soils to challenge wine grapes while they're in production time. Let's jump back.
Do they ever, this may be a stupid question,
Hmm.
but you know how you, like with regular farming, you rotate crops? So do
Mhm.
they ever rotate something in specifically to pull the nutrients out of the soil and then throw like in a different season or is it always that here's your vineyard and this is where the vineyard is?
That's a great question.
Okay.
They actually do an undergrowth,
Mhm.
and they will do an undergrowth to replenish the soil with certain nutritional elements, but
Okay.
not everything. So they don't want it to become a rich, overly fertile soil,
Okay.
but there are certain nutrients that the wine vines do need, and they will actually do an undergrowth for that, and they will grow and they will die and they will give that nutrition
And
back
undergrowth like a ground cover?
there. It is. It's like a ground cover,
Okay.
and they'll do it for two reasons. The most common reason is nutrient replenishment, very specific nutrient replenishment. Okay. The other one is to actually, sometimes they do it just to cover the ground so that different weeds won't take away additional nutrition from, so they really have to use very, very specific plants. Mm. Yeah, and it depends region to region. So if I were to say, oh, well, which undergrowth do they use here? It's not consistent region to region, and it's not consistent wine grower to wine grower. They all have their own favorites. Okay. All right, let's see here. So let's jump back over to, I feel like I want to see the next slide. Okay. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the specifics of the winemaking for this guy. Okay, so Baron de Lay is a winery that is based, their base winery with their largest part, they're throughout Rioja, but their largest one is on an original old monastery in Rioja Alta. It looks like a truly ugly place, and why would you ever want to visit that? Right. And then that's one of their that's one of their vineyards right there. This guy, they actually created, so in 1985 is when when they started when they bought that monastery and began making wine. This wine, the one we're drinking, the museum, is their oldest vines, but it's one of their newest creations. So there's a give and take on that. So this began in 1999 with the acquisition of a new vineyard, which was another defunct monastery. Mm-hmm. So what we're drinking tonight is not, say, 40-year-old vines. These are 100-year-old vines from that vineyard. So that's why they named it the museum, because it's their oldest vines. And they take that and they actually work with it, work with their barrel usage in a way that they thought would be particularly pleasant for Americans to drink. So this is an American palate-driven version of a Spanish Rioja Reserva. So what would
be the difference between like the one made for Europeans?
And basically, they use newer American oak in this one, and a little bit more time. So I'll talk about that now. Okay. So these wines, the grapes of these wines are hand-picked and not machine picked. They are transferred into stainless steel vats and crushed. They go through an initial 21-day fermentation, which they keep at somewhere around 50 to 60 degrees. It helps with the helps keep maximum color extraction without getting off flavors, because they don't want to have too intense. Later on, they'll actually increase the temperature for fermentation, but the initial, they keep it down a little bit. The aging process in Spain is called a crianza. There is a wine style called crianza, which is minimally aged, about 18 months. This guy is, after the initial 21 days, it goes into 22 months of French oak barrels, but new French oak. And then after that, they bottle it and they keep it another 15 months in the bottle before they ever release it to us.
Is that
And
unusual? That seems like a long time in the bottle.
Yeah.
before.
in Rioja, it isn't. It is the requirement when you want to get to a Reserva level wine. So
Okay.
they have the Reserva level, so you're under 3 years,
Mhm.
and then they have the Grand Reserva level, which is above 3 years.
So, because we're at 5 years.
Right. Well, that's because of the additional time in bottle,
Okay.
and then the time to get to market.
Okay.
But and then this guy is actually a small production. This is they've been doing this since '99, which sadly is kind of a long time ago now.
Well,
Time
when you
is
said
flying.
85, I was like, oh, so like 7 years ago. Nope.
But what was I didn't say?
Yeah, no, when you said 85, and then I was like, no, 75 years ago.
So I don't even know where I was going. Anyway,
We were talking about 99.
I know. I can't even remember why I was talking
Okay,
about 99. It's okay. It's all right. All my notes are here. It'll come around. I'll probably just use it as a non sequitur later on when I find my notes. But anyway,
You're answering Elizabeth's question about what it would be different about why it's Americanized is how you went down that rabbit hole.
oh, right.
Yeah, you did good.
That's true.
That's why we keep Julie around to keep you in touch.
Therapist, we have to remember like how to
Little details. Little details.
Believe me, there's
Just
multiple
kidding, the
reasons I
brilliant
need
chef and
a
all the
therapist
things.
around. Anyway, before I continue just lecturing, let's talk a little bit about the wine, because I wanted to give you guys a little bit of the background on this. These are old vines. It has been kind of structured for the American palate. What are your thoughts? Did they succeed?
I've kind of got to echo what Elizabeth said earlier. I didn't get that bite, like usually when you drink reds, you have that, I don't know if it's tannins or whatever the correct term would be, but it's very smooth. Like you don't get that, like that harshness to it.
Yeah.
Exact same thing I was thinking. Yeah, it's really smooth.
Mhm.
I leaned over to her earlier and I was like, I think it's like a little oaky because it did have that sort of like American oaky feel to it. And I was like, not the same way like a California wine would be, but I was kind of like, oh, this is like a little like woody, a little oaky, right? Like you're getting some of those flavors out of it. So like when you said that, I was like, there you go. Like that's sort of like filled in that little puzzle piece there.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing because you're not getting a ton of vanilla. The vanilla is not overwhelming this wine.
Mild.
And there's not dill in this wine at all, in my opinion. And that makes it French oak. So it is young oak, but it's French oak. American young oak, you end up getting a ton of vanilla and you get a dill quality to it.
Is there anything like everybody keeps saying black cherry, obviously great. Is there any other like cherry like berry flavor in it at all?
I'd go blueberry because of that really dark purpley quality I'm getting.
It feels just like a heavy berry to me, and it without
Maybe raspberry. Yeah, something like that.
Maybe
'Cause
somewhat,
it's
especially on the
red.
finish. You can guess. I would go raspberry when you're transitioning from berry to that cranberry finish because it does finish with a nice acidity.
Yeah.
I could say that there's a raspberries that moves off that black cherry toward the cranberry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was even thinking like that blackberry where they're not as sweet. There's like a little bit of like that bitter, not that it's a bitter wine, but like that drier taste to a blackberry.
And I'd say one of the interesting things is if you've had other Spanish Riojas, they normally have a lot more acidity to them, and that is one of the things I'm going to guess somebody who knew what he was doing tasted these grapes and realized, wait a minute, I know where we can work with these guys. Because a normal, or at least stereotypical, Rioja Reserva is going to be much more cranberry. It's all about the cranberry, some floral. It would almost give us some Garnacha type qualities. Remember when we were drinking the Crianza and then we were drinking the Guigal from Côte d'Aron? We had all that nice kind of a cranberry freshness going on. That is very common with the Tempranillo grown in this area because They get a lot of really cool nights and a lot of sun and dryness, but they're not intensely hot. They'll hit 85, not 102. And so these older vines, though, are giving us these more intense, dark, rich flavors, which I really like. It mimics. Well, I'm going off into a tangent here. I was going to say it mimics a Ribera del Duero, which is a region of Rioja. We'll get into that another time because I love that region. We'll drink one in a couple weeks when it makes sense. I've got to cycle through some other stuff. I can't stick in Spain the whole time. The ownership group of this guy is very different from last week's discussion. So the Astrolabe Pinot Noir that we drank last week from New Zealand, small family-owned winery, working with people that the winemaker personally knew for 20 to 40 years during his time here. Now, these guys are a little bit different. They're more like Iguigal. So if you remember when we were in Côte d'Aron, the Iguigal was a large ownership group that had 40 to 60 year relationships with growers in France. And they get really great grapes, but it is a large group that does have good control, which gives you an amazing price point in the end. They do have that ability to create that. What these guys do, the Verdelais group, they actually use their ability and their purchasing power to flat out purchase the grapes.
Okay.
So all of their stuff is estate grown, but they are owning large areas, and it is a conglomerate. So I can't really say, oh, here's the winemaker and this was his vision. It is a group thing, but it is some absolutely beautiful areas. And I think they've created a beautiful, unique product at, to me, what is an amazing value price point. I mean, to get this guy sub 30, this is an impressive bottle of wine. I hope you guys agree.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah, I like this one a lot. One of the things you said before, I think you can totally smell like an allspice or like a baking spice on it, but like it does not taste this way like to me at all. Like I take a sip and I'm like, oh yeah, you kind of get that, like you said, like maybe a little bit of a licorice or like that kind of spiciness to it. And I take a sip and I'm like, oh no, this is like, especially as it has opened up, is very fruity in a way. It's like it's smooth. You get a lot of red fruit and stuff like that. I don't know. It's really interesting. I like it.
I'm glad you like it. I found that, as it's had time to take a breath, the tannins have gotten fatter. They've gotten a little more aggressive. And, in the beginning, I would have called them, medium and subtle. And now they've gotten fatter, and they're still not aggressive, but they're certainly, they're hard to miss.
Yeah, they're definitely not as, I wouldn't say that they were subtle at the beginning, but yeah, I noticed them more now than I did at the beginning of it.
I would almost go from like in the beginning, more of a tannin for pork or duck, and now that it's opened up a little bit more, I could go venison, and I see the game reference that they make in the pairing suggestions. Venison, actually, it would still be really good with portobello burger too. So.
Jeff, many of these wineries actually grow other berries besides grapes? Because we always talk about, there's notes of cranberries and there's notes of blackberries. Are there any like higher dollar wines that actually infuse in different berries from the region into the wine with this?
No. It's all just taste alikes. What is interesting, and this actually comes from the beer side of things, my training, my graduate school in brew science, is when you're tasting something, you say, oh, well, it tastes like black cherry. Or in the beer side, if we have hops and they're saying, oh, well, it tastes like pine, or, it tastes like, like pineapple, even that kind of a thing. What you're tasting, that molecular structure is the exact same molecular structure. So
That's why you taste it.
That's why you taste it.
Oh.
So, which I always find kind of fascinating, that yeast is instrumental in doing that. One of the other things that I find interesting is, so let's say, Brian, so you're in an area, and this is very true. We'll do an Australian Cabernet Sauvignon. Australian Cabernet Sauvignon from certain regions, especially the southeastern side of Australia, tends to have a lot of eucalyptus to it. Well, that's because there's eucalyptus in the area. But beyond that, why would that jump in there? You're not tasting actual eucalyptus. It's the yeast. Yeast is this biological organism which we love. I mean, it's funny. It's one of the earliest cases of domestication of an animal in the world because we began using it to ferment. But yeast takes on some of the quality and characteristics of what it feeds on regularly. So when you have yeast sitting on these eucalyptus plants and their fruits and that kind of a thing, generation on generation on generation, and now you begin putting in vineyards underneath those same eucalyptus trees, that yeast is going to jump over and it actually imparts a bit of the quality of what has been feeding on generationally to the wine, which I think is entirely cool. I'm sorry, that's just badass.
When we get these notes of different berries, is it from that process always, or is it just
Good
like that's
question.
okay?
It is not always from that
Okay.
process. It's a combination. It's some of both, and some of it is just simply that with the chemical process and the fermentation and the breakdown of the sugars, that it happens to create those same molecular compounds that taste a certain way, and they match up in our brains to, oh, I know when I tasted this, I was eating a papaya, that kind of a thing. Any other questions, anybody? Let's jump over because it's my favorite stuff.
I had a question, Jeff.
Yep.
You mentioned that this was aged in French oak. Like, what was in that French oak? What was in those barrels before?
Oh, nothing. These were new French oak.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why there's so when I described it as aggressive, which may have not made sense at the time, it is a young, new French oak. So this one was absolutely made for this use first time. So from here, most likely they took that cooperage, the barrels, and used them for more of the traditional Reservas that would have less of an effect from that French oak. They want something, when you have less aggressive, once it's been used, it will, you'll have more, you'll have, you have more acidity left over and a little bit more of the terroir. Whereas one of the things we haven't discussed tonight, which we did a lot in France and even in New Zealand, was earthiness. And I'm not getting a ton of it. To me, it's more about the barrel playing with the grape in the circumstance. So that would be a description of an aggressively coopered wine, or aggressively oaked. And now French oak is going to be a little less aggressive than American oak. That's what I was talking about before. But so yeah, this would be his first use.
How many times do they use it then? Is it just for this one time and it's gone, or what?
They will, in this case, I know what these guys do is they transfer it over to their Rioja Reserva standard production, which is not lesser than, it's just different. And because they want something that's going to be a little less reactive. So they'll clean it up. And they can use it, it depends on what they're going for. I would certainly think at least 3 times, because after they do a Reserva with it, they then will take it, because the Grand Reserva is in oak so long, you don't want it to be aggressive most of the time. You want to keep a quality of the wine that will still express itself from the terroir, even if it's been sitting in there for 3 years. So my guess is that it would go from here to the Reserva over to the Grand Reserva. And then after that, they'll send it out to someone else, maybe a brewer, or over to someone that wants to do something with whiskey or something like that.
I have a question. Maybe I've got the wrong wine because I do have the Reserva.
Oh, this is a Reserva, but
Okay.
it's a specific style of Reserva. Good question. Good point, Brent.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's the traditional Reserva, and this museum Reserva with the older vines is kind of an American specialty blend that they put together.
They sell it in Spain, or they only export it?
My understanding, and I could be wrong, but I feel like I remember this correctly from talking directly to the Baron Delay rep. This is only sold in the United States, and it is not large production. We actually, the state of Florida received 7 cases, and I love this wine, and I actually work with Baron Delay regularly, and we've purchased 4 of those 7 cases.
Wow.
And last I heard, the 3 cases I brought in so we could have this tasting were the last 3 in the state.
Wow.
I'm
I
hoping
would say I would revisit this, but I can't.
there's a few bottles left.
Taking care of us.
That's right.
You can revisit it for a limited
That's
amount
right. I
of
think we
time.
have 5 bottles left in the store from the 18 I brought in. But I'm going to try to get them to bring more down from New Jersey because sometimes they sell things faster than New Jersey can, which makes me really happy. But it depends, and it's usually Wine Geek wines that we can talk up. You know, like this is the same guy. This distributor is wonderful, and they really support me. The guys that brought in the Viverti Dolcetto that we tasted, and that was never in the state of Florida until I requested it, and then they brought that in for us. So we still have that in store. It's delicious. All right, let's go to my go-to finishing slide almost here.
Mhm.
We can hit share.
Thank you. Okay, so wine scores explained. Oh, you know how I love to finish with this, but I'm going to keep up on it because I want everyone in the world to understand. So, so many people come into the store constantly saying, "Oh, I don't want to taste anything above 90 points." Below. Excuse me. Good point. Hey, look, sometimes people only want crappy wine.
You're below 90, you're very good.
Well, that's a good point.
Just below 90.
You're making my point. Very good.
I did text you,
You texted me
both of you.
just
My,
now?
my wine picture. No, last week.
Oh, yes, you did.
Yes. Yeah, right. No, fine.
Julie did not drink an outstanding or a classic.
Oh, that one was probably about a 60. So anyway, so people coming in, I do like to just kind of bring this up because I have a lot of amazing 88-point bottles in the store, and sometimes we for a little while I wouldn't even label them as 88 points, and I was thinking, wait a minute, this is silly. So like I say, 90 points, you're talking about an outstanding wine, superior wine, which is great. Let's do that every time we can. But when you know, if you come in and you have an 88-point wine, there's nothing wrong with that. It's fantastic. Actually, I kind of wish I had deleted my next one, which showed that the dichotomy. Because the first thing is, there's a misrepresentation, or I think a misinterpretation in the wine drinking world of what points really mean. So I mean, if you were to buy a $13 82-point wine, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But
can you share that again?
oh, sure.
For me, like when I'm looking at this, and it could just be because my first day of school is tomorrow and I teach school, but when I'm looking at this, I mean, this kind of goes along, it's a little bit stricter, but it kind of goes along with if it were grades, you know, like 75% is mid-range, it's a C, you know,
Right.
it's mediocre, you know, and certainly once you hit 60, it's failing.
Right.
So 74 is a little harsher as far as a grade, but if I can think in terms of percentages and grades, this kind of goes along with that,
Right.
you know. And so I know that we've talked about before, why isn't it the bottom 0? Well, if I was thinking 50%, that's failing,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. That makes
So
sense.
even at 50,
Sure.
even though I guess the lowest grade you could get would be a 0, but not in this scale.
Right.
So I think if you think about it that way, it kind of makes sense. What were you saying?
Do you always agree with these? Like, is there like a lower, like 50
Good
to
question.
64 wine that you like, that you don't agree with the score?
Yes. And actually, I just deleted it, and I should have kept it. So Google would keep that, right? Even though I deleted that slide.
It would take a little bit to
All right,
get to
so
it. So
everyone that was here last week saw a perfect example of exactly what you're talking about, Brian. I'm going to retrieve that and put it in with the ratings to show the difference. So what we showed last week was a wine rep came in and offered me a Pinot Noir from Patagonia in Argentina, which is one of my favorite new areas to buy Pinot from. They're fantastic, reasonably priced. And he said, oh, 94 points, James Suckling, which James Suckling, I respect his opinion. Fantastic, sounds really good. So I did a little additional research in there, And there was a 94-point rating from James Suckling for that wine and that exact vintage. And then there was an 83-point rating with a not buy recommendation where they said it tasted chunky
Yeah, that
and
was a
like
really harsh
cough syrup
review.
from Wine Enthusiast on the exact same wine.
Mhm.
So yes, that's exactly right. First of all, there is this kind of an odd thing where it's like 50 to 100 and there's nothing below 50. But the other thing is you can have, even among people that everyone has agreed their opinion matters, you can have a significant dichotomy. The most important thing about the wine you're drinking is that you like it. Absolutely. Because of that. It's nice to get a general idea of maybe what to expect. But the bottom line is the most important thing is always, always listen to Jeff.
Okay.
Usually the critics do agree like within a standard deviation, basically.
Just true. Yeah.
But sometimes you do get very disparate opinions about it.
Well, that's only 10 points though. Is there one that's like so drastic, like someone gave it a 40 and it's like, this is really good. Like, why would they give it a 40? You know, like, is there anything that stands out?
I gotta say the 10-point difference is by far the biggest difference I've ever seen, ever. And you gotta understand that for most people, giving an 83 is the same thing as giving a failing grade, saying this is absolutely not recommended, which is part of the reason people get annoyed with that because it's not what that's supposed to mean. But for people to put an 83 on paper, it usually is a real problem. But the weird thing is 88 is a solid wine, like again and again. Like if you look at it and people say, yeah, I gave it an 88. It was a good wine. You should drink that. So the truth is that there's a huge difference between 87 and below. That's where I find the truth to be, is 87 and above. Yeah, drink that wine. It's going to be fine. You're not going to hate it. That's after hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of wines over the years, kind of what it's boiled down to me. 87 and above, you're actually probably going to be fine. Below that, go ahead and skip it for another one.
Okay, so 86 and below is the issue, or below 87, because first.
Below 87, yeah.
Okay,
Because
because I
there's
was
some,
wondering the number 87.
No,
So that would, we're
I would
good
drink-
at 87. Don't really try below that.
I would drink an 87.
But the one thing you
Yes.
just talked about, the problem is depending on which review you read.
Right. I haven't had it yet. I'm going to drink it and tell
Okay,
you what I
to
think.
see.
Because it's too much fun. Right now we have to
Is
know.
it good? Is it crap?
Right. Jake wants to be there. And then,
You just need to do a week with a crappy wine. Just be like,
But don't tell anyone.
Really, bring in with
yeah,
you.
don't tell anyone.
oh, I could drink it.
Everybody has to pitch in 50 cents.
Yeah.
And bring out your finest china.
Exactly. I'm going to tell you, there's some really, really popular wines out there that I could bring in on that. And I'm
We should
assuming
do a
nobody really
blind-
pays attention to my
blind
videos.
tasting.
But
Oh, I like that.
What did she
Like,
say?
do
What'd you say?
three. Do three, like, what you would consider run-of-the-mill wines and like throw in a really, really good one and see if we could figure it out.
oh, blind tasting. I tell you, when we're able to have you guys in the store, I am absolutely going to do a blind tasting like that.
When we can have tastings in the store, because right now, we're 50% capacity, but just isn't
That-
full enough to do a tasting and have like walk-in business too, so.
Right. But when
You
we
can
can.
come in at 11 a.m. It's fine.
Working already? Not Jeff, but the other people.
I'm working, but I happen to be drinking while I work. I mean, somebody's got to do it.
I'm kidding. I never drink before 5.
You mean 5 a.m., right? All right, so
Maybe we should wrap up.
let's wrap up and go to next week's.
Going in the
We'll go to
after
next
party.
week's preview, please. All right, next week we're going back to white wines. I usually do like a 3-in-1 cycle. So we're doing La Chablisienne Petite Chablis, 90-point wine earner. Yeah, well, like we discussed, whatever that's worth. It actually is quite a delightful wine. Chablis. The reason I wanted to do a Chardonnay. I wanted to do this style of Chardonnay that is gaining a lot of momentum right now. Traditional Chardonnay is going to be really oaky and buttery, at least Californian's version. This is not that case. So Chablis within Burgundy is known for all stainless steel production, not oaking their Chardonnay. And this is by far the screaming edge of what is recovering Chardonnay as a drink, a white wine for the modern wine drinker. So great pairings with this.
People are leaving from this.
They're leaving Chardonnay because of the buttery oaking.
Well, that's why I love Chardonnay.
Right, and
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's right, wrong, or sideways. It's okay. I know people that like the buttery, and that's okay. But overall, the market is leaving the buttery oaky behind. So I thought Chablis would be a great way to combine old world with a new. Not that they've changed; they've always done it this way. But this is the new standard that seems to be picking up momentum.
And you
So-
said this is California?
No, this is true French.
French,
So this
okay.
is within Burgundy, within the Chablis region. And we'll go into all the fun of French wine designation next week.
What does it say? Black truffle fricassee over creamy.
So creamy, there's a word that I was hoping was going to be visible. It's something.
I could totally get that at Publix.
Yeah, those are clearly
If I can see, polenta.
polenta. That,
Okay.
Oh, that's yours.
so
I don't know what.
Yeah.
find out, but anyway.
we'll just
Okay.
jump over there.
Members of our party are wondering, would you recommend any certain cheeses with this next?
The next one, yes.
That's a good
Good question. I would go. I'd say Brie is a no-brainer. Brie is
Mm.
fantastic with Chablis.
Just because
Because
it's
you've got-
French.
Well, that too, but you've got so two pairings. You either go with complementary or a juxtaposition,
Okay.
and in this case, you're going juxtaposition
Okay.
because you've got the nice fresh crispness of a Chablis with the creaminess of a Brie,
Mm.
and I think they would go.
Can you text
really,
me that
really
photo, Daddy? Can you text me that photo?
All right. Well, that is what we're doing next week. I hope you guys all join us, and I hope you enjoyed yourselves tonight.
I
Yeah.
hope you enjoyed us.
I enjoyed you and the wine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
So much fun.
Very good,
Cheers.
as always, yep.
We're going to toast.
Cheers,
Stop
guys.
recording.
Mhm.
Watch out.